I'm going to talk this morning about learning. And I thought before I get into that, I should introduce myself. I know some of you here, but I don't know most of you. I'm Nigel Robertson. I work in the Waikato Centre for E-Learning. It's we're commonly known as WHISTLE. It's what Anna was referring to in her talk. We're also part of a larger Centre for Tertiary Teaching and Learning, and here at the University of Waikato. And our Twitter fall seems to have, okay, it's going to fall off every time the screen decides it's going to sleep. So I'm also known as Easegill, at Easegill on Twitter. That name comes from the longest cave system in the UK, where I spent many hours and crawling about in passages, searching for connections between different places. While I was back in the UK, I didn't spend all my time underground, and this other picture is taken from the mountain Ingleborough that was at the back of the village where I lived. And originally I come from Edinburgh. Some of you might detect, great. Some of you might detect that in my accent. It's one of the beautiful cities in the world. But before I came here, I spent 20 years in the Yorkshire Dales, and I think that's mangled my accent somewhat. The hill in the back here is Ingleborough, where that earlier picture was taken from, and this is the beautiful limestone rock that all these caves form in. So I'm now living in Hamilton, Kirikiriroa, or the Tron, and I think Hamilton is one of the most underestimated cities in New Zealand. When I arrived, I saw it would get quite a bad press, but you can see from this picture, it's actually a very beautiful city with the mighty Waikato River flowing through there in the background. And I should say that this is Martin Dougiamis. That's not me. He will be here. Not in person, but he will be talking later. So that's my introduction, and over the next couple of days you are going to be catching up with old friends, making new friends, and I think in terms of that it's time that you started to get to know each other. So for the next minute or so, I just want you to turn to one of your neighbours, whether that's to your left or right or in front or behind you, and just say who you are, where you're from, and maybe somewhere where you've lived in the past. So probably want to do that with somebody who you don't already know. So off you go. I'm going to calm you down because I'm very conscious that we started late and people are going to complain if I take up too much of your morning tea time. But it was great to hear such a buzz there from people. So over the next 2 days, you're going to hear an awful lot about Moodle. And my guess is that Martin Dougiamis, when he talks after lunch, will mention Moodle at some point during his talk. So I'm not going to talk about Moodle specifically this morning. I'm going to talk about 3 things which I think are important for us, and they're important whether you're using Moodle or any other digital technology. In fact, they're important for your whole life online. So the 3 things are really about learning, about open as a default, and about digital literacies. So I'm going to, seeing that I'm already 20 minutes after my start time, Stuart, I'm going to rush through this really quickly. So we've always been learning. We've been learning since we came into existence. We learned how to survive in the environments that we existed in. And this is a picture from Skara Brae in the north of Scotland in the Orkney Isles. This is a Neolithic village, and this homestead is about 5,000 to 6,000 years old. And you can see that there's a lot of skill and thought gone into the design and construction of this house. And my guess is that somebody didn't just sit down one day and go, I'm going to design this house like this. That there was a lot of learning took place in terms of making this house, and it's part of a much bigger village. And people would have experimented with, where do we put the fire so that we don't get smoked out? Where do we put our bed so we stay warm? Where do we put the entrances to reduce the drafts blown through these buildings? And you know, having been in the north of Scotland, I can guarantee you that there are lots of drafts there. And, you know, so the important thing here for me is that people learned by doing the things that they needed to do in the context where they needed to use that knowledge. In a more, you know, coming into more modern times, but this picture still about 50 years old, we've had apprenticeships, and now we might have vocational education, where people learn by going out and doing the jobs that they're eventually going to do. But they're not doing that entirely on their own. They are mentored through that time of learning. They have, in this case, they have an apprentice master who will guide them through the various stages of their understanding and their skills. And they will be effectively scaffolded through that, and you know, scaffolded through their zones of proximal development if we start to throw some theory about how people learn. But eventually they will become a master of their trade. And one ironic thing about this picture is that this guy here is a compositor, a print compositor for a newspaper. And of course that job is now entirely obsolete because these computer things have made that job redundant. So sometimes we don't have wood or stone or metal to work with. Sometimes it's ideas and thoughts and concepts. And I think it's, you know, although these are perhaps less tangible things, it's still important that we actually work with those things to be able to understand them. I could read what somebody's written in a book, and I could perhaps write an essay about it. It sort of passes through my brain, but it doesn't necessarily get locked in. I need to get my hands dirty or my brain cells dirty with the thinking that's going on there to actually start to develop some deep understanding. And we can, you know, some people can do that on their own, but most people do it better with other people, and we might do that through things like debating or discussing with people. We have discussion boards in Moodle. We might blog about it, and nowadays we might even do that through things like Twitter. But the important thing is that we work with those ideas and concepts. And I want to show an example here from a teacher here at Waikato. I'm not quite sure if she's here today. She's working with students who are learning to become teachers themselves. And they are grappling with new ideas and new concepts is part of that role. To do that, one of the exercises she gives them is to create a podcast. And they have to take an idea, a concept that they want to deal with, and they have to work out whether they agree with it, whether they disagree with it, or whether it's brought some enlightenment to them. And so they then have to record their podcast. They post that up into Moodle, and their fellow students give them some peer review on that. So then they take that peer review and they have to go and reflect on that and work out whether what they said originally is justified, whether they've been challenged by the comments that have been made. Do they change what they do? And they have an opportunity to re-record their podcast, and they submit that back. But then they need to go and transform that piece of work into a textual commentary on their journey through this learning. And the thing for me that happens here is that there are multiple touch points for the student in terms of dealing with those ideas and those concepts. They're continually having to work with them to work out, you know, can they justify their stance on things. And I think besides engaging students, it's important that our teachers are engaged. And this example here is a teacher giving feedback on some project reports from her students. Project reports are loaded into Moodle, and the teachers then fired up a tool that we have here called Pinopto. It allows lecture capture, so it's recording me at the moment, but it also allows you to just capture things on your desktop. And she pulls up the essay, and she can talk to that essay. She can highlight things, and she can give feedback which is much deeper and more meaningful than the scribbles in the margin that we traditionally give on work. And for me, it shows a teacher who is very engaged with her students' learning, and I think that is, you know, something which will be reciprocated by those students. They see that learning is valued by people. When I started working with Moodle, one of the things that I liked about it was that it said add a resource and add an activity, and it put those things on exactly the same level. Working with other LMSs, it's always been very easy to add a resource, a file or a folder of things. Adding an activity tended to be hidden away in a drop-down somewhere on the right-hand side of the screen. But Moodle made those things equal. And now in our Moodle 2 world, those things have been joined together, and when you open the add an activity or resource dialog, you actually get these activities at the top of the screen, the things which I think are important. It's not to say that adding resources, let's say text and documents might not be important, but we need to think about those documents as being things which inform activity, rather than starting off with the idea that we add documents and then we might create some activity round about that. So the common things in this for me is that we learn well by doing things. We learn by being engaged with the things that we need to learn, the sort of idea of active learning, and that engenders deep learning. Learning which becomes embedded and long-lasting inside me, rather than surface learning, which is something which I can use to get past the exam at the end of the term. But once I've done that, it goes, I can just throw it away. I don't have to remember it anymore. And so, deep learning is important. And I want to labour this point in a way about active and passive learning. And you see here that we generally remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, but we tend to remember 90% of what we actually do. When we design our courses, what we often do is invert that pyramid entirely. And so the vast majority of what we put in to our courses are things for people to read, and the smallest part are things for people to do. That might not be true of this audience in particular, but I think if you think about what you see elsewhere, you're going to find that most of the time, an awful lot of the time, far too much of the time, we use things like Moodle as a repository for files. And when we ask students how they learn best, this is from some research at Bradford University, they say things like, I prefer practical learning. I get bored when I'm just listening to somebody. And I know when I put this up, I thought this is the point where I need to go and sit down. Second person says they like to study independently, but then they like to consolidate it by discussing that with people. And they like to interact. And the final person says, I learn best from doing things and thinking through a problem with other people. I don't learn much just by reading about it. And I think a lot of that is because it doesn't have any context for us. We need to actually work with those ideas and bash them about a lot. And if we're thinking, what might that look like when we design our courses? Bloom's taxonomy of learning has been about for a long time. It has some key terms and then a number of verbs which describe those key terms, the things in black. So if you want your students to remember things, then you might give them exercises where they list things, they identify things. This revision by Andrew Church has been about for a while, so a lot of you, I'm sure, will have seen it. He added a number of extra verbs there that describe things that you might do in a digital world. So in terms of remembering things, you might want your students to bullet point stuff, to search for stuff. But at the top end, at the end where we're moving into higher order thinking skills, you might get your students to be blogging, to be podcasting, to be remixing things. So they're taking those ideas and not just describing them, but they're actually working with them, moving them about, transforming them. And you can't get through a Moodle MOOC nowadays without showing Joyce's Moodle tool guide. So again, if you are trying to work out what might this look like in my course, how do I move from what I do now to do some other things, there is a lot of help out there. And for those of you that don't know this guide, down the left-hand side in black, it describes a whole pile of elements of Moodle, activities and resources that you can add. Across the top, it lists a number of things that you might want your students to achieve. So do you want them to gain some information? Do you want them to assess their learning, or for them to collaborate on stuff? And you can look down the matrix and work out which tools might be best for those things. There's lots of stuff on Moodle.org, and there's lots of stuff on YouTube. So go out and search for help when you think, okay, I do this, but how do I do something extra? So if we believe that learning is anchored in engagement, then we need to design for engagement. As teachers, we can be a catalyst for our students' learning. We play a crucial role in that, and that role is to enable the opportunities for our students, our learners, to learn. So I said that I wasn't going to really talk about Moodle very much. I did mention it, but I just want to remind you that Martin Dougiamis will be along later, and he will talk about Moodle after lunch? Before lunch? After lunch. I'm sure he will talk about Moodle. So I want to move on to Open now. Yeah. trying to move through this quickly. What is openness? Anna mentioned it this morning, and I think it's a very important concept. It's something that we hear about, but a lot of us struggle to really get to grips with. What does it mean? What does it mean for us? And so, rather than me trying to explain it, I thought I'd let these two girls tell you about.
You can't use up the warm sunshine. You can't be prevented from breathing clean air. So why is knowledge so hard to access?
The solution? Open educational resources. Materials used to support education that are free to access, reuse, and share by anyone.
Irish playwright and co-founder of the London School of Economics, George Bernard Shaw, said, "If you have an apple, and I have an apple, and we exchange apples, then you and I will still each have one apple. But if you have an idea, and I have an idea, and we exchange these ideas, then each of us will have two ideas. If I have an idea and give it away, I still have it to give again. And if I give the idea away again and again, I still have the idea left." Even U.S. copyright laws only protect the expression of ideas. The ideas themselves belong to the public. Just like air and sunshine, knowledge is a public good. The Internet is the perfect vehicle for open education resources. As long as they are connected to the Internet, students and teachers everywhere can access high-quality courses online.
That's close to 1/3 of the world's population and 99% of American schools.
And all open education resources online are free, too, so it gives access to students and teachers of all socioeconomic backgrounds. Plus, since it's all online, no more struggling to carry a heavy load of books, open education resources are portable and save trees. And it's a great way to keep current with all the latest information and trends. So with the Internet, there's nothing in the way of any student or teacher from receiving courses from places like Harvard, MIT, or Yale. But the best thing about open education resources online is that you can completely adapt them to fit your individual needs. Revise them. Adapt and improve open education resources to tailor them to your class. Reuse them. Use open education resources as a teaching aid in the classroom or to deepen your understanding at home. Remix them. Combine multiple open education resources to produce new materials. And redistribute them. Make copies and share open education resources with other learners. So open education resources allow you to connect with and help you to create a community of learners.
Making sharing knowledge as easy as pie.
At the 2012 Olympic opening ceremony, there was a section which celebrated British inventions. And during that, Tim Berners-Lee was sat in the middle of the stadium, and he tweeted, "This is for everyone." And I think it's a really important statement. He wasn't talking about the Olympics, he was talking about the web. The web is something which we work with every day. It's not closed. It's free. It's somewhere that is not locked away. It's not available just to elites. And a lot of the stuff which actually runs the web is also free. So we already work in an environment which is free and has freedom built into it. Now, I'm going to leave this as a rhetorical question because we are short of time, but I think I know the answer. That if we think about what it is that we do, we could probably be fairly certain that there are other people in New Zealand or in the world who do things which are pretty much the same as what we do. And the chances are that we're all creating resources to support what it is that we do. Before the internet, there wasn't really any easy way to share resources between each other, and that was our default position. We created things to support us and that we could use with our learners. But the internet has changed that entirely. It's now made sharing text and images and data a trivial task. And in New Zealand here, some of you will know that it's become that easy that institutions like ACC, the Earthquake Commission, and last week IRD routinely share files with complete strangers across the country. So when we're open, I have access then to rich streams of resources. Things that I couldn't have created myself, either because I don't have the expertise or I don't have the time, or things which economically I couldn't afford to buy. So the images in the presentation I'm using today are all licensed with Creative Commons licenses, whether those are other people's or mine. And that is perhaps, let's say, the free part of openness, the sharing part. But openness goes further than that. It gives us freedom to actually start to work and rework those things. And we can also use openness when we create things. If we create things in an open space, then by co-constructing things and collaborating with things, we can bring in value that didn't exist in my head. I can add knowledge that exists in the network that I wasn't aware of. So, that is benefit to us both as users of open resources and as creators. Oops. So this slide here is an example, I suppose. This is taken from a number of different drawings by Giulia Forsyth in Canada. She is a live illustrator. She'll sit in and talks and actually make drawings as people are talking. And she licenses all of those drawings with an open license. So that meant that I was able to effectively do what she's got in this virtuous circle of OERs down in the bottom right-hand side, to reuse her work, to revise it, to remix it, and to redistribute it. So it continues to bring value to this work. And some of the key things that are on this are that teachers and students already share. They share knowledge and understanding and questions and good times and hard times. We share ideas, as the two girls showed in the little video beforehand. And the internet allows us to share files and copy and move those things about really with minimal cost. But it says here copyright restricts, and the solution to a lot of that is to use Creative Commons licenses. We are still saying that this item is mine, but I'm now saying this is what you can do with it. And that brings a lot of freedom for us. John Wilbanks said that the opposite of broken, the opposite of open is not closed. It's actually broken. So for somebody who can't access these things, it is if it was broken for them. And Giulia makes a point at the top here that as stewards of education and of learning, it is incumbent on us to make openness a practice and part of our culture. And I know that we're not all working directly as teachers here, and that there are a number of people working in coding and development. And so I don't want to leave you out. So, when I hear culture, I reach for my source code. And it is that code which enables a lot of the openness on the web. And I would like to say that you need to help a lot of the rest of us be open by creating opportunities for that. So for instance, in the new file picker in Moodle, I can now license my work with a Creative Commons license. That sort of thing is important, but it's also important to keep our internet free and uncapturable. So open gets bandied about a lot. It gets added onto all sorts of things. Open access, and I mentioned earlier, the ability to read research outputs. Open badges, I think there's a talk on the Open Badge framework for Moodle later today. Open data, where we can work not with the outputs of research, but with the inputs to research. And we can take that data that somebody's collected and actually start to bring different value to it. Open source, as I mentioned earlier, Moodle is the, probably the world's leading open source learning management platform. And there are a whole pile of organizations, far, far more than I could have ever fitted on this slide, that support openness. But I wanted to point out NZ Gold, since we're in New Zealand, and this is the New Zealand government open access and licensing framework. And that is a framework that the government has developed in which encourages government departments and ministries to publish things using a Creative Commons license. And the reason that they do that is because they believe it brings significant creative and economic benefit for New Zealand. So this idea of sharing things, of being free with things, isn't something which is just dreamt up by some hippies over in the corner. This is something which governments and scientists and academics across the world think is really, really important. And I would encourage you to consider that in your work. And in terms of what that might look like in education on a bigger scale, this is an initiative by Jim Taylor at USQ. He came up with this idea. He met up with Wayne McIntosh at a meeting here in Palmerston, and from that started to develop the Open Educational Resource University. And there are a number of universities across the world signed up to this. And the idea here is that that courses are developed and they're populated entirely with OERs. And learners can come to these and learn at their own pace, at their own time. And they can get support from some volunteers, students at universities. Eventually they can, when they're ready, they can take assessment and they can get proper credit for that, things which will lead to a full degree with the same value as a degree from any of the institutions awarding those degrees. And this is bringing education to people who might struggle to access it because of the economics, the cost that involved in coming to a university, because of their social or personal circumstances. But we have a burgeoning population in the world. We have huge numbers of people seeking education, and our systems aren't really going to manage that. And so developing things in an open space, I think, is really important for this. And so I'm probably going to skip through this. I'm going to let you off this because we are short of time. But I do want you to go away and think about what you can do to be open, whether that is by starting to use Creative Commons licenses on things that you make, and that could just be the pictures that you take. Can you release your lesson plans? I know there are initiatives within the school system to start to see about getting boards of trustees to allow teachers, because my understanding is at the moment that the things that teachers create are technically owned by the board of trustees at the school. So there are moves afoot to try and persuade boards to release things under a Creative Commons license, so that if you create a great resource here, that all those people over there can use it too. And so consider that later today. So my final section is on digital literacy. And digital literacy is very much the elephant in the room. It's the thing which we don't recognize in our work, and it's often a thing that we don't even recognize in ourselves. And so what is digital literacy? I'm going to also get somebody else to give their explanation of digital literacy. This is Doug Belshaw in the north of England.
Oh, hello. Yeah, that's today, isn't it? The Waikato thing. Yeah, Nigel asked me to put something together on digital literacies. I should go and do that now. So pretty much everything we do nowadays has got something to do with the digital world, the digital realm. You don't have to just love digital devices to use them pretty much all the time. So for example, my phone has got a digital display on. I have to understand the menu system to deal with that. That's just a normal standard phone. And then I've got a touchscreen PC in my kitchen. Well, okay, not everyone's got a touchscreen PC in their kitchen, but why have I got that? Well, because it's easy to access recipes and music and see what the weather is and everything like that, to keep up to date with the rest of my family as well through social networks and stuff. So almost everything we use today has got some kind of digital element in it. And you don't have to be a complete geek to want to be digitally literate. I mentioned digital literacy there, but what I really mean are digital literacies. Because, for example, messing about with an iPad is different from using a television, is different from using other devices as well. So it's always a particular literacy. You're doing something for a particular purpose. And to my mind, that's where you start when you're getting started with digital literacies. So to my mind, just start with something that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be a VLE or something like that. Just start with an e-book reader, for example. Now this particular one I like rather than the Kindle because it's got, you can put SD cards into it, and I like that. But I had to understand at one point in my life what you do when you put an SD card in, what that means, and how you navigate the menus, and how it connects to other things, and how to set my Wi-Fi network. Find something that you're interested in, and just go from there. So at the end of the day, digital literacies aren't something that are clean and polished and nicely packaged up that you have to just learn and imbibe. They're something which come from within you, something which is based on interest and things that you enjoy doing. So go out there and find something that you enjoy that's digital, and just learn how to use it, mess about with it, tinker with it, and find someone else to help learn with you. Or even better, teach them, because the best way to learn stuff is to teach other people how to use it.
So, in the end there, Doug said, mess about with it, tinker with it. And I think that those are a couple of things to hold in your mind as we, as I quickly go through this. Because having a slot before people want to go and get their coffee, morning tea is always difficult. Paul Gilster, who wrote the book Digital Literacy, said that digital literacy is about mastering ideas, not keystrokes. Critical thinking trumps technical competence. It's not the things that we do, it's not the keys that we press, it's what we do, what that means when we press those things. And that's one of the things that Doug was talking about. Alan Martin from Glasgow University says it in a slightly different way. He says digital literacy is a condition, not a threshold. It's not something that we can gain by doing something like an international computer's driving license and say, okay, I've ticked it off, I'm now digitally literate. Digital literacy is an ongoing thing. It's about attitudes and the way that we approach the digital world. And we should be clear that this is 1957. UNESCO said it's not really possible to speak of illiterate and literate people as two distinct categories. And exactly the same is true when we think about digital literacy. Our digital literacies exist in many different spaces. They exist over time and they change over time. And I might have some understanding of how to use Facebook, and I might start to use Twitter, and I can transfer some of that knowledge into my use of Twitter. But I might not be able to, I might not do very well at transferring that knowledge into my use of a wiki, where the trust and reputation needed to work together with people is perhaps different. So these things are moving about in different ways. So JISC in the UK said that digital literacy defines the capabilities which fit an individual for living, learning and working in the digital society. It isn't just about work, it's about our whole lives and how we operate in a digital world. How do I interact with my family, with my friends and with my work colleagues? What is the language and the register that I use when I'm interacting in those spaces? George Siemens, a talk he gave here at the university a few years ago, he said that that really the landscape has changed. We need to stop working in the environment that we had before the internet arrived. The internet arrived and it's changed the game, and we have to consider how we start to take advantage of the affordances that technology brings us, and that we don't spend our time doing the same old things, even though we've got all these new shiny devices. What is it that these new shiny devices offer us that bring benefit, and how might we then use that face-to-face time that we have with our students to much more advantage, rather than standing at the front in a situation like this and talking to people, and people only seeing the tops of their heads as they busily write everything down. The Horizon report for New Zealand, it came out at the end of 2011, said digital literacy is a key skill for every discipline and profession. So that means that nobody here can say this doesn't really concern me. It's something which is important for all of us and for all of the people that you work with. And I also said one of the challenges was that most academics are not using new and compelling technologies for learning and teaching, nor for their own research. And I think that's true not just of academics, I think that's true for teachers. And I think one other thing that's true is that we're not even using the existing technologies that we have in new and compelling ways. We continue to do the same things that we did 20 and 30 years ago. We've had a project running at the university to try and support the development of digital literacy amongst our staff. Our staff to develop their own digital literacies. And we've got a number of themes there. One is openness. We're trying to persuade people that open is an important space to be in. One is participation. People have to engage in their own digital literacy. It's not something that somebody else can tell them what it is. It's not something that they can turn up to a workshop and go away and say, I've done that now. One is about sharing, and that comes from the openness sphere, but very much about sharing their experiences, their journeys through digital literacy, and how that, if we share things together, then we learn together. One is about understanding their online identity. And say, what is it, how is it that we work in different spaces online? How do we reconcile the fact that I might tweet about things here to do with Moodle or to do with work, and I might go home and tweet things that are entirely unrelated to work. And we've been trying to develop a permissive culture, a culture where people feel enabled to actually try things out, to work in this digital world. And as an example of that, we know that lots of institutions, whether those are academic institutions or elsewhere, a complaint is often heard about IT departments, and IT departments prevent us from doing things. And IT departments often work on the paradigm of we will give you the minimum amount of things that we can give you to enable you to do your work. We've been trying to move here to a position where our IT department, and we've support from our IT director for this, that they will give us the most things they can possibly give us, and still keep their system secure. And it's quite for me, it's a fundamental shift in thinking for people. And one of the things that we've had, we've got these themes overarching all this. We've been trying to develop wonder and curiosity in a digital world. This little boy here, exploring underneath the chest of drawers, you can see he's not frightened of what's there. He is wanting to see what he can find. And often we approach change, and we know our digital world rapidly changes. We approach these new things with a sense of fear. It's something which is unknown. And we're trying to persuade people that rather than it being an unknown space that that's dark, it's terra nova, it's land that we can explore and experiment, and there are lots of things to learn there. So, in summary, I think three points just to going back over those three ideas. Design learning which requires activity. Get your students to engage with the ideas that they want. Getting them to make things tends to be good. It allows that, it creates that opportunity for activity. Be open, your karma score will go up for it. And approach the digital world with wonder. Explore and experiment with it. So, sort of the end. Stay social, keep sharing. Enjoy your time here at Moodle over the next 2 days. But it's not quite the end yet, because the really important thing might be that Martin Dougiamis will be up after lunch, just in case anybody's forgotten. He is there watching us. But the really important thing is, it's now over to you. So, thanks very much.